homosexuality? I mean, of course, you've given your experience, and you don't know the experience.
I don't know if South Africa is much more tolerant than before, but what I am saying is that because of the Constitution, because gay marriage is now permitted in South Africa, because of those two things, because they have the law on their side, more and more people are feeling less ashamed about coming out and saying, this is who I am and I'm fabulous. Whether other people are more accepting of that is a different story. I'll give you a little vignette. I remember being in a minibus taxi in Johannesburg one Saturday morning, and it was the same morning that certain parts of main roads were closed off because Johannesburg was going to have their gay pride march. And some people in the taxi didn't know that is what was happening. And so I got into the taxi and people said, what's going on? Why are they closing roads? And this old black woman said, hey, these gays, they want to have their match, so let them have their match. And that, to me, that was an interesting moment. There wasn't contempt, there was like an acknowledgement. You have your sorts. I mean, they want to have their thing. Let them have their thing, I suppose. Like, there isn't, I never got the sense that is very evident in certain parts of this country that extending certain freedoms to gay people in some way threatens the freedoms that straight people enjoy. I seem to think that in people's minds there is a separation between them enjoying their freedoms and me continuing with my life, and never shall the two meet. Again, except when you're talking about women who have the power to say no to men who think women shouldn't have the power to say no to them.
Okay, so we are going to close this interview. This really great, very dense interview. We really enjoyed it. We're going to end it with two questions. Mm-hmm. And the first one is, what is the overall tone of the LGBTQI community? And I think I asked that already. I did it right. Did you ask that? I'm so sorry.
No. You asked this question here, so this was
we did ask that. We just explained how it is in the community. Okay. So then the last one. Sorry. Hey. Mm-hmm. So I guess I just want to know, what vision do you see for South Africa in regards to LGBTQ rights? What do you hope to see in the future? What is, your vision of...
people ask this question not specifically in terms of LGBTQ rights, but just generally of South Africa. And it's usually couched in the following manner. Now that Nelson Mandela is no longer here, what's going to happen with South Africa? And that, for some reason, stems from some belief that while Nelson Mandela, even in an almost vegetative state, was in some way some moral authority that was an anchor to the country and preventing it from going to pieces, he had that effect. And now that he's dead, now what? And I don't seem to think so. I think that if the country was going to fall apart, it probably would have done so by now. I think South Africa has a lot of problems. And I wouldn't necessarily, if I were president, I would not necessarily view human rights of a variety of kinds as the number one problem of the country. I would not necessarily think that people's human rights in South Africa today are in any way in any kind of danger. in particular, given the history of where we come from, I do not feel that South Africa is in any way devolving back to, not necessarily apartheid, but to equally bad circumstances, not at all. But what I do think is one of South Africa's gravest issues is how to keep its economy going in ways that ensure that more and more people enjoy the fruits of the economic prosperity that does bubble to the surface. Like, does it trickle down? Is it equitably distributed? Because, the number one issue in South Africa is poverty. There is an inordinate amount of poverty. And whether you're gay or whether you're straight or whether you what, there's a lot of poverty, and it's still sadly along color lines. And so that when you go there, that'll be the first thing that will hit you, first and foremost. Now, in terms of gay rights and where those stand, now that we have gay marriage, it's kind of, it seems as though gay communities around the world, once you get married, it seems like, what's the next milestone? Like, we seem to have everything, but of course South Africa has everything on paper. Now the hard work is to make sure that everybody gets what's on paper, that everybody knows that what's on paper. And I think I believe if South Africa can solve the issue with gender and the way men treat their women, and it just so happens that this question of gender is something that's critical to a lot of developing nations. It's not just South Africa. That just that male-female relationship when it comes to the economy, when it comes to human rights, when it comes to access to healthcare, when it comes to a lot of things, that if South Africa can tackle that, they'll automatically tackle what is more in crisis than anything else, which is the experience of black lesbians in South Africa. I wouldn't worry too much about men. I think it's more straight men on all women. That's a problem. And if you were black and you were lesbian and you were going to South Africa, I would say, be careful. If you were black and you were male and you were going to South Africa, or if you were just gay going to South Africa, I'd say, have a good time, go to these places. But with women, I'd say, be careful. I can't say I know, not having been, I can't say I know exactly what it's like, but I've heard it's very different to what I experienced as a male in South Africa. And not being a straight male, it's something I'm not quite sure what is the best way to talk to my fellow brothers, to convince them otherwise, to disabuse them of this myth in their head about who they are in relation to women. I've never understood it. And I don't know if they'd want to hear from me specifically on the topic. So,
Well, thank you so much, Cindy. Thank you so much for your time and for being here.
No, only a pleasure.
Informational.
No, thank you for all the questions. You pried a lot out of me that I didn't think I remembered or cared to share with other people.
I mean, we didn't expect so much personal
I didn't expect to
from you.
give so much time. I read all these questions. I don't understand. I don't understand. And so some of them I'll feel like I'm rambling because I'm trying to find like what.